Hello, data folks. Thanks for joining me again on this channel for data and IT professionals. In our previous video, we explored the real problems with many-to-many relationships and understood how bridge tables help us solve those problems. In this video, we're shifting away from traditional modeling approaches and exploring data vault modeling techniques, a modern approach that has rapidly gained adoption across enterprise data platforms in recent years. All right, let's first understand the problem that led to the evolution of the data vault approach. One of the main challenges that the enterprise data teams face is dealing with data coming from different source systems. This is especially true for the same business entity or table. For example, a multi-brand car dealership business may receive customer and sales data from multiple systems, such as CRM platforms, in-store sales systems, financing systems, and third-party franchise or partner systems, all with different schemas but representing the same core business entities. Another common scenario is migration projects, where a legacy system is being replaced by a new system. During this transition period, both systems often run in parallel for some time, generating data for the same business entities. These systems produce data in different structures, and those structures frequently change over time, making data warehouse integration and storage complex and difficult to maintain. Traditional data warehouse approaches, especially simple third normal form designs, struggle to handle this effectively. They lack the flexibility to accommodate new source systems without significant rework. That is not all. Another challenge is that organizations must meet strict governance and compliance requirements, including preserving complete historical data exactly as it was received for regulatory auditing, and maintaining full data lineage back to the original data sources. This is exactly where data vault modeling comes in, an approach designed to handle evolving data structures, multiple source systems, and strict governance requirements in a scalable way. Let's understand where the data vault structure fits into your data platform. We get data from source systems, which first lands in a staging area, typically an object storage system, such as an S3 bucket. This data may be structured, like relational tables from databases, or unstructured, such as JSON files or event streams. From there, the data is loaded into the raw vault layer, where it is organized into hubs, links, and satellites. We'll break all of these down shortly, so don't worry. On top of that, teams often create an optional business vault, where some of the business rules, derivations, and standardizations are applied, while still following the same hub link and satellite structure. You can think of the raw vault as an integration-friendly layer, while the business vault acts as a business-friendly layer on top. Finally, the data is published into data marts, often in a star schema format, optimized for reporting, dashboards, and analytics consumption. If you look closely, we are separating two concerns with a clear boundary. One is flexible ingestion and storage of source data without forcing early consolidation or complex transformations. The other is shaping and structuring data to enable effective business analytics and reporting. Data Vault primarily focuses on the first concern, capturing and storing source data in a flexible, structured, and history-preserving way, while leaving the second concern to downstream layers. Let's take a real-world project scenario and see how data vault modeling helps solve many of the challenges found in traditional data warehouse design. Take the same example we discussed earlier, a multi-brand car dealership business. Let's assume we receive data for customers, vehicles, sales representatives, stores, and sales transactions from multiple source systems. For example, customer info is received from 3 different systems, each with its own attributes and schema, and so on for other domains as well. We start by identifying the core business entities such as customers, vehicles, stores, sales representatives, and sales transactions, and model them as hubs. Hubs store only unique business keys, along with basic metadata like load date and source system, and they also include a hub hash key to uniquely identify each record, this similar to surrogate key in other models. It is important to note that hubs do not store descriptive attributes. Those are handled in satellites, so there's no concept of history or slowly changing dimensions in hubs. Regardless of how many source systems you have, there's always just one hub per business entity For example, one hub for customers, one for stores, and so on. Next, we design the satellites. Satellites store all descriptive attributes of a business entity along with full history over time, similar to SCD Type 2. Another important point to note, to make data integration and storage flexible and scalable, we define multiple satellites, typically one per source system or schema. For instance, customer data coming from different systems can each have their own satellite, even if they describe the same business entity. This allows us to isolate source-specific attributes and changes without forcing early unification. Each satellite is still linked back to its parent hub, ensuring we maintain full traceability while keeping ingestion and storage flexible. Now that we have structured the entities using hubs and captured their descriptive history using satellites, the next step is to define how these entities are connected. This is where link tables come in. Link tables capture the relationships between business entities, showing how different hubs interact in the real world. For example, in our car dealership scenario, a customer is connected to a sales transaction, a sales representative is involved in the sale, and a store may be associated with that transaction. A link table stores only the IDs or hash keys of the related entities, along with basic technical details like load date and source system. Sometimes, a link may also have its own hash key, but that's optional. Now, let's ask a simple question. Do we have any information that belongs only to this relationship? Customer details belong in the customer tables. Transaction details belong in the transaction tables. Same is true for sales rep and store. So in this case, there's nothing extra that belongs only to the relationship itself. That's why we have not added any satellite to this link. Now let's look at another link between sales transaction and vehicle. We create a separate link here because the relationship works at a different level. A single sales transaction can include multiple vehicles, and the same vehicle type can appear in many transactions. Now ask the same question again. Are there any columns connected to this relationship? Yes. We have fields like showroom price of that vehicle, discount offered, GST, road tax, etc. Please note, these details are at the vehicle or line item level. Header level totals and discount information are stored in the sales transaction tables. If you look carefully, these values don't belong only to the transaction or only to the vehicle. They belong to the combination of both. So in this case, we store these details in a satellite attached to the link. The next interesting question is, how do we decide the number of satellites? It mainly depends on how different source systems provide the data. For example, one system may send percentage-based discounts and taxes, another system may send exact amounts instead of percentage, and a third system may provide only partial pricing details. To handle this cleanly, we can split the data into multiple satellites, so each format is stored safely without forcing everything into one structure. Along with source systems and schema differences, there are other reasons that justify creating separate satellites. For example, some customer attributes change more frequently than others, like address or phone number. In such cases, frequently changing attributes can be stored in a separate satellite so that history is managed more efficiently. Another reason is loading frequency. If some data arrives hourly, while other data arrives daily or monthly, it is better to store them in separate satellites to avoid unnecessary processing and keep ingestion efficient. Security and access control is another important factor. If some attributes are sensitive, such as salary, credit score, or tax identification numbers, they can be placed in a separate satellite so access can be controlled more easily. Overall, data vault modeling provides a flexible and scalable approach that adapts to evolving source systems and changing schemas, preserves complete point-in-time data history, while still enabling consistent integration and joining across all business domains through hubs, links, and satellites. I hope you now feel confident and ready to apply data vault modeling techniques in your upcoming project. But before we wrap up, it's important to understand that data vault is not always the right fit for all use cases. If you do not have multiple source systems feeding the same business entities or strict compliance requirements to preserve complete source history, then Data Vault can introduce unnecessary complexity without delivering real value. In such cases, a traditional third normal form design, followed by star schema, is often a better fit. That's all for today. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And as always, please share this with your network. It really helps us bring more useful videos your way. Thanks for watching.